Today is Monday, May 16th, 2022, and this is Sandra Lafky Carlson in the Tualatin Heritage Center in Tualatin, Oregon. And I'm here with Mike Lofton, who is video recording the oral history that Larry McClure is going to give us today. Welcome, Larry, and thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Well, let's start with a little bit about where you were born. I mean, you've been in Tualatin a long time, but where did you start life and grow up?
It all started in West Tennessee in March of 1941. And my folks were living there, and soon the World War II began in December. And after that, my dad decided, like a lot of young men, it was time to join up. But the only thing they would accept him for was a training school for training pilots in Florida. So off we went on a journey that took us eventually all around the country at different states over the years as my family moved, and they taught school. He was working for teaching as well as in military type situations where they were training pilots. So that did get us around the country. And that started, I guess, my wanderlust in life.
Okay, and you and your family you and your parents ended up in Washington State?
Washington State in the early 60s. And I had graduated from high school in Texas, and I went to the University of Washington. My dad was working for Boeing at the time. And so after finishing there, I got my teaching degree, and my first job was down here in Portland, teaching high school at Roosevelt in Portland, and that's where my career began, in education.
Mm-hmm. And then you came to Portland to teach, and then you met Ellie in Oregon.
Yes. Well, I taught for 4 years in Portland, and then I wanted to kind of try something else, and I've already been interested in writing and English and such as that, and so got a job for the Oregon Department of Education, working with the state superintendent of public instruction, at that time an elective office. And so they needed a speechwriter and a public relations person, and that sounded quite interesting to me. So I resigned my job in Portland and came to Salem, 1967. And that's where I met my wife Ellie at a church there, Trinity United Methodist Church, where we were both attending. And that's where we met, and soon, a few months later, actually, in December of that year, we got married there in that church.
And then I think you've mentioned that Ellie found a house in Tualatin?
Yeah, actually, after that period of time, the state superintendent, Dale Parnell, said, you ought to go on to the University of Oregon and get your doctorate. So I did. We left Salem and went to Eugene for 2 years, where I earned that degree, and my first job after then was at the Northwest Regional Educational Laboratory in Portland, a research organization, nonprofit. And so that took us to Portland then, where, again, Ellie, by that time, had our first child, Doug, who was born in 1971, and that started a new life for us with kids. So after Doug was born in that year, we moved to Tualatin in 1972, where he had his first birthday in our new home out on a street there in Apache Bluff called Cheyenne Way, and one of the first developments of that sort in Tualatin, and that's where we still are today.
And what drew you to Tualatin?
Well, it's proximity. Actually, I didn't know at that time if that job was going to last, because that was government-funded work, and contracts come and go. So I said, well, let's stay near a freeway in case I have to go south or go north to Portland again or somewhere to find work. And lo and behold, I stayed at that organization in Portland for 30 years. So then I later retired from there in 2001, and that's what happened. But it was a great place because it looked sort of semi-rural at that time. Only 900 folks were listed on the sign in Tualatin as you entered town, and Kmart was just getting started. where today the Nyberg Rivers area is, Cabela's and New Seasons. That's where Kmart was, and we started here with that small town feeling, good schools, low tax rate. It was a great choice.
And I know you've been involved in a lot of activities and organizations in Tualatin and beyond. What did you do in the early years here in Tualatin? How did you get involved?
Well, because of our Methodist background, both Ellie and I had been Methodist a long time growing up. So we joined the church here, which was Tualatin United Methodist Church, and it's the only church in town at that time. And now there are about 17 different churches here who are very strong and moving ahead. But we started getting active in the little old church where today is the home of the Heritage Center where we sit today. But it was moved from that location later. That'll come up, I'm sure, later in our talk today. But yeah, that was very important in our lives as our kids began to grow up in that church. And that time we only had Doug and that year, and it's just a country little church with 30 people attending normally, and everybody knew everybody. People like the Nyberg family were there, and others that were later involved in the city and had been for a long time. So pretty soon, though, that little church got packed and outgrew the location, and a new church was built in 1982 up on Martinazzi Street, higher up on the hill in Tualatin, and so that's where we still go today, and we're active in that in many ways.
And you were both you and Ellie in the choir at that time?
Yes, at the old church we certainly were. In fact, where I'm sitting today was the choir loft, so to speak. And one Sunday morning in November of '73, my wife was very pregnant. We didn't realize why until later, but that morning she turned around to me and said, "I think my water broke." And lo and behold, our twins were born later that afternoon, about 4 o'clock at the Kaiser Hospital down up in Portland on Interstate Avenue. And we got there and we thought things were ready for me to come in to help her with the birth. And we'd been trained in how to do that, and I had learned how to breathe with her and all of those techniques. Finally they said, "No, you need to go down and sign some more paperwork." I said, "I've already done the paperwork. I'm ready to go in with Ellie." And they said, "No, go down and sign those papers." So I did. And lo and behold, the lady downstairs said, "Oh, Mr. McClure, you're the one that's going to have at least twins." And I almost fell off the counter because I had never thought of this. And Ellie, in the meantime, they'd x-rayed or something and they discovered two. And lo and behold, that again changed our lives. Not only did we have a 2-year-old running around, but now we had 2 more. But it all worked out because there's a network of mothers around the city in this area called the Mothers of Twins Club. And they immediately started, somehow the network got out and we got calls of offers of extra strollers, extra changing tables, whatever we wanted. And my friends at work subscribed to a daily or a weekly diaper service, which helped us a lot. So things happened, and we all survived it. And today they are all grown and have their own families. So you look back and you wonder, how did we ever do that? But we did. It just happened.
And the names of your children? Well, the oldest is Doug.
Douglas is now 50 this very year, and the twins are 48, I guess it is then, and they are living up in Puyallup, Washington. Both families are there, where they are. 2 of them are educators, and well, 3 of them, and actually 4, that is. All in education business up there. Doug is in Georgia, where he's an engineer in high-tech industry, but he works from home and never has had to go to an office. So that's the realities of life today.
And the twins' names are?
Andrew and Jennifer. All 3 of our kids went to the Tigard High School because the Tualatin High School had yet to be built later. 92, I think it was, when that was built. So they were the twins were the last class at Tigard High from Tualatin. So they did go on from there to Pacific Lutheran University up there, and that's how they landed up in the Tacoma area, where they still are today, like I said. So yeah, it's been a fun adventure, but now our house is quiet again.
And I know you're very active in the Grange. When did you start attending the Grange or joining?
It was sometime after I retired. That's when I also became active in the Historical Society, because you have time then for other things. During working years, we were so busy with all those things that we had nothing left of the day, really, hardly. So it's actually Lois Martinezzi who got me involved both in the Historical Society and the Grange. And the Grange is an interesting organization, part of a national network from the early years, where farmers in the local small towns, rural areas needed a place to congregate, swap ideas, lobby the government for electricity, more access to the railroads to sell their products. All of those things important in the agricultural era of our country. And today, not as much important as it was in those days. But here in Tualatin, there's always been an active Grange. And it was a place where people could have social events, square dances, potlucks, activities, all sorts for the young people. And so the building still stands and is still very well used over by the lake here in Tualatin downtown. And that's why we want to keep that building, and that's why I joined the Grange, to help preserve some more of our history like that.
Mm-hmm.
The building was constructed in 1940, all by volunteers.
Mm-hmm. I think my grandfather helped dig out the area of land with, or maybe it was either the Grange or the church.
That was this building here.
Was it this building?
Where it was over there,
And
yes.
they had to excavate for the basement, because there was a basement.
After they built the church, they had to dig underneath it to build a basement or a fellowship place, kitchen, and so forth downstairs there. And so now that we moved the building here to become the Heritage Center, no basement. So.
How did that happen, though? Could you talk about that, how
Sure.
the Heritage Center was the church? And
Well, in about 2004, rather, the building was still being used over there by what was then Clark Lumber. Now it's burned down. But today, that location is sitting there not used or not built on yet. It's an empty space. But one of the users of the building was another church in 2004, but they got so small and struggled, and they finally said to the Historical Society, would you like to have the building? We didn't own the land underneath it. That was belonging to the Clark Lumber Company then, but we owned the building. They did. So they sold it to us at no cost to the Historical Society. But then what are we going to do? The Historical Society is not a very wealthy group at all, certainly a hard-working group of volunteers, but we raised the funds, and with the city of Tualatin, we're able to move the building over here by the police station and create the Heritage Center. Yes, that building was sturdy enough for the move, and one Sunday afternoon in August of 2004, I guess it would be, the building was moved, and 2 years later, in February of 2006, the building opened as the Heritage Center, and it's been going strong ever since.
Mm-hmm. And you've been involved since retirement in the Historical Society here?
Right. It didn't take long for me to get involved, like I said, thanks to Lois and others that said, let's get working on Tualatin, preserving Tualatin history. So I was elected president at one point there for about 2 years. But then when they moved the building here, I agreed to become the first director of the building, or manager, so to speak, at no cost. That was no problem. But it turned into an interesting challenge, and we finally now have a good manager here full-time, or at least part-time, every day, 4 hours a day, to keep the building functioning as the city wanted. So we're still in a great partnership with the city to make this building work. And others are using the building now, renting the facility, and making it stay alive. And we promised everyone that once we moved it here, it would not go dark. And that's a danger in places like this where it's abandoned almost and glass gets broken out or something happens to it. But now we are still very well using this as a community center.
And you're very involved in the community garden here in Tualatin.
Well, yes, one of the churches here in town did start a community garden called Boone's Ferry Community Church down on Boone's Ferry Road. But theirs did close down 2 or 3 years ago, but we started one on that idea at the Methodist Church on Martinezzi. And yes, it's a booming business now with 28 rental plots for the community and 2 large areas where we grow produce for the food bank here in town. And it's been very successful. I think now it's its 8th or 9th year coming up. So yes, things are going fine there. And the food pantry over here really loves to have fresh produce, hard to get for many of the families that come there every week. The last count I heard was 700 families rely on the food bank every month in our town.
Oh my. Oh. And you also have quite a garden at your home.
Well, yes, I do have that green thumb, I guess, even though it's getting harder to make that thumb work now. But still, we grow these plants and we plant them wherever we can. I have a lot of tomatoes and I start them and give them away to others. But I have other little crops as well. It's just fun to grow it. We may not be able to eat it all, we share it with others, but it's just fun to see things happen. From a little seed grows into great bounty often, and that's been fun to do.
And what type of tomato do you recommend?
Oh gosh, I have about 10 varieties I grow, but it depends on my mood, I guess. My favorite really nowadays is one called Chocolate Sprinkles. It's just sort of a dark little guy, the size of your thumb, but it's perfect. There's also Sun Gold, another orangey yellow one that's popular. And then the big slicers, my favorite one of those is called Pineapple. It's a big one, and it fills one slice will fill a whole sandwich. And it's beautiful yellow with red streaks. It's just fun to see what you might get.
And so, do you have any yard at all? Any grass?
Well, we used to. We used to have a yard where we had to mow, and that started to change my mind after a while. So now we have a big area still, but we just keep it in compost and bark dust and a lot of shrubs. We had somebody help us design it so that I wouldn't have a lot to take care of, and now I have to have somebody to take care of the weeds though. So where I don't have the grass to mow, I've still got weeds to handle, but still it's fun to have these things there. And now some of those trees are getting very big over the years too, so that's another issue.
Because they take up room, or because
they just keep getting bigger. Got to keep pruning them to keep the size manageable. But it's still, I used to have a plum tree out in the front yard. I was known in the area as the guy that had all the weird stuff in the front yard, vegetables, vines of pumpkins, flowers. Now I mostly do flowers now, but yeah, one year my prune tree, we were actually called the Brooks prune, developed here in Oregon. It grew very well for about 10 years and had great crops, but one year they were so big and sweet that the raccoons heard about it. And pretty soon they would come around the neighborhood and come up my tree and strip every one of them off right at the time I was going to pick them. And they would eat all those, and you can imagine the little droppings that are around the whole area after that.
Any other wildlife?
Oh, yeah, we haven't seen possums for a number of years. I don't know what happened to the possums, but we have squirrels that drive me crazy. They'll dig up every little thing. They look around, the jays hide peanuts, and the squirrels try to find them, vice versa. I have little holes everywhere, but that's life. They don't eat a lot. What bothers me if the birds come in and eat my blueberries. I gave up on trying to protect my blueberries from those. Let the birds have what they can, I guess, because I'm not going to fight that. I got to share the wealth, I guess.
Also, could you talk a little bit about your involvement in the Willowbrook Arts Camp here in Tualatin?
Well, the Sweek House is next door here, and that's the oldest house in the city, 1858. But over there was Althea Pratt Broom, and I heard about her and what she was doing. We'd seen activity in that place since the 80s when our kids were growing up, and we knew something was going on with colorful awnings and balloons and activities in the summer in the backyard of the Sweek House. And lo and behold, it was a camp for kids in the summer. Music, arts, drama, dance, theater, and our kids never went to it because they went to church camps. But later on then, when I learned more about that program, Willowbrook Summer Arts Camp was then moved over to the Browns Ferry Park in Tualatin, and they were looking for a board member to come on who had interest in this. So I said yes. And that started a 12-year journey on the board of directors for Willowbrook. Very successful summer program for kids, 6 weeks long. You can come for 1 day or 1 week or all 6 weeks. And it's amazing to see what's happened to kids over the years from that program. So, yep, I was proud to be on the board for that. And I helped start the Lions Club here in Tualatin back in the 70s when we came. Our neighbor, the Ingers, asked me to come to a meeting, and I did. And pretty soon, again, I was active in the Lions Club, which still goes on today, but I'm no longer a member. I had to cut back when the kids started getting interested in sports, and it took many hours to take them to soccer and all those other things that kids were doing as they grow up.
And you have been very involved in the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation.
Well, I was not a history major when I was in the school business, and so about the time of 1997, there was a film that came out by Ken Burns on the Lewis and Clark story, and I got interested in that story, and then I read a book by Stephen Ambrose called Undaunted Courage, and that amazed me about the story of how these guys and one lady named Sacagawea came across this country when it was still wilderness, exploring and documenting everything they saw on the way for 2.5 years. They spent 4 months out here at Fort Clatsop in very miserable conditions and came back to Jefferson with all these discoveries that they had made, which were not new to the Indians. They had met 56 tribes along the way, and they first thought these were savages. They didn't realize how sophisticated these tribes were and the way they lived in these places. They were adapted well to the environment and to the conditions, and they had made quite a history of themselves. But anyway, they came through thinking they had discovered something new. But now we have this great westward expansion which happened, and we're here because of it. We follow their pathways, the Indian pathways, to build our roads today. We follow the rivers that they also used for transportation. And I just got so fascinated, and I was still working in this research area of education. So we started developing curriculum based around these kinds of stories, where you could help kids see how the things they learned in school were actually used even then by Lewis and Clark to survive that journey. And only one man died out of the 33 that were on the trip. And they did all that with their level of knowledge, which at that time was not very sophisticated, but they did make it. And today we have their exact record, thanks to the journals they kept along the way. They didn't have cameras, they didn't have audio recordings, but they did write it all down. Somehow they did it in dire conditions, rain, wind, snow, and that's why I was an English teacher when I was in this classroom, and so that's now I teach all these subjects in a new way. If I had known I could use the Lewis and Clark story as an example of how things we teach in school actually are used and were used.
And the bicentennial of the Corps of Discovery was just a few years ago, and I think you were involved in celebrating that.
Yes, that's just a few years later, 2003 to 2006 was the 200th anniversary of the Lewis and Clark journey. So yes, I got involved at the state level and then nationally in that to help the country understand this story and what it meant, as well as the Indian side of the story. And so, yep, we did a lot of work, and Oregon was a big part of it because this is where they came down the Columbia River and spent those months in the Fort Clatsop area. So, yep, it was an exciting time. And of course, now that's passed, and we're still working on building signage along the trail, keeping the story alive as best as we can.
And have you, I think you have either traveled along part of the trail, or you have visited many places?
Yes, every year there's a national group of enthusiasts about the Lewis and Clark story, and every year they meet somewhere along the trail from Monticello all the way out here, and every year people gather from all around the country to learn more. There's always something new to discover about where they actually camped along the way, or which direction they took, or how did they get around here, what did they do there. And this coming year of 2022, it'll be in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where they built their keelboat and came down the Ohio River to get started. And so that's what we do every year somewhere. Here in Oregon, we do have meetings about every month or so, and we also are out there looking for these places, trying to discover something more.
You were very involved in the annual conference, I guess you'd call it, in Astoria 3 years ago?
Yes. In 2018, my wife and I were the chair people of the event in Astoria for the country to come to. And we had, I think, 400 people. And yeah, it was quite an arduous time for 4 days, 5 days of activities and explorations and speakers, but I still enjoy it. And I'm not going to organize another one of those meetings because it's very hard, but still it was fun just to see the people come and enjoy and learn about our area here at that time of the year, which we did in October, a little earlier than when they were here in December, January, February, and March, 220 years ago almost now.
Yes, I attended for a couple of years in Astoria, or a couple of days in Astoria, and it was an amazing event. It was just so informative and interesting. It was a salmon dinner one night that some of the Native people had prepared
Right.
for all the attendees, and a boat ride on the Columbia with the bar pilot talking about his experience, and also various sites were marked and people could visit them, and it was just a wonderful event.
Yeah, those are great times to sort of experience history yourself. And even though you can't be there today, we have reality shows on TV which are nothing close to what they went through. Today I wonder if there's ever a way we could have a reality show on TV that duplicated the Lewis and Clark story. I'm not sure our young men and women today could actually do it, but that's what we try to do, is help bring history alive.
Mm-hmm. And I think recently you've been involved in helping some young adults or high school students learn about different occupations. Is that right?
Well, that was another focus of my work at the laboratory in Portland, which is this research place for education. And we developed an alternative school in Tigard at that time, an idea for one there that we wanted to try out. And so I was in charge of documenting, just like the Lewis and Clark journals, exactly what the Tigard High School folks did when they created this program. This involved kids going out into employer sites around town and learning on the job by watching how these employees use their math, science, history, subjects we teach in school in their work and see it in action rather than reading it from a textbook. So that's model. It just celebrated its 50th anniversary, in fact, over there in Tigard. Tualatin High School has a version of that going as well today. So I was pleased to have a small role in documenting that program and seeing it flourish. So yep, that's been my other interest, is how do we help young people choose and explore and look at career opportunities. As we all know, at least in 2022, college costs are very high. And after you spend all of that money, are you really going to be sure that's the job you want? And you're still paying off this loan for many years. We think it's a better approach to try some of the things in that job or like that job early before you make a decision. So that's why I still believe it's very important to let young people experience the world of work, get a taste of it, and actually help teachers see in the classroom how they could help young people apply the skills they teach in real activities.
You and Ellie often go to Mexico, especially in the winter, I think. And what is it that draws you to visit Mexico so often?
Well, January and February here, you know, are kind of dark and drizzly a lot of the time. So we decided to start going down there. We gradually got more introduced to it. We found it very comfortable, very safe. We love it down there, the warmth, the people, the food. And so now we go every year for a couple of months almost. And we do like to travel other places. We have been. I hope we can continue to do that as we look around our world at what's life like in other places. But yeah, we do like to travel, and we hope we can do it for a long time.
So you've been a very active resident in Tualatin over the many years, and you've seen a lot of changes in Tualatin. Could you talk a little bit about that and what you see maybe in the future as one of the biggest challenges for Tualatin residents?
Well, one of the advantages of Tualatin has been a steady leadership, I think. We've had only three, maybe we're on our fourth city manager in all these years that we've been here. And as opposed to some areas that have a lot of turnover in those places, we've had good leadership on the city councils and very active people in these civic organizations and social organizations. For a time, I've been on what was called Tualatin Tomorrow, kind of visioning community, a committee looking at the future, what we need to be doing. But one of the most exciting things for me has been the changes in Tualatin's population as we see more diversity happening, more inclusivity, as we have other groups from other countries coming here, learning to assimilate, making our city richer in its activities. And that's pleasing to me to see how we've opened our arms to, I think now Tualatin has about 20% of its population is now Latino or Latina backgrounds. And but other parts of the world too. Just down the street from where I am, we have a family from Nigeria of wonderful folks. And so gradually we're seeing some changes here that are very rich. So that makes me feel good about the future of our town, and we've got a diversity of restaurants and cultural opportunities that happen, and we enjoy all of that. So we're just pleased to be here, and we plan to stay.
And I've noticed, living in another community, I've noticed how there's such a strong group of volunteers in many aspects of Tualatin life, and people like you who I think really make things better here.
Yeah, our library has been a great example of volunteerism, and our high schools and middle school and elementaries are all very involved with the community. Parents are active, from what I observe. I'm no longer there myself, but noticing the changes as we've added more schools, the rise of athletics for kids has been amazing. When our kids started, there was not much, but now there's every sport I never even heard of when we came here. Lacrosse, that was a different one for me to watch. Soccer, our kids started that, and that was just new. So yeah, things have changed. We have to adapt, but still this community offers all of those things. We've got a good base of civic organizations still. The Rotary Club being one, the VFW, the Elk Lodge. We have 17 churches now, I think. Ours was the first, like I said. So yeah, a lot of changes, a good base to build a family. I think it's still a good place to come to live and to grow and to play and work. We have this large employer right out here not far from us today with 3,000 workers at Lamb Research. So a good base of high tech. We have non-polluting industries, and we have growing neighborhoods. We do lack affordable housing, and I'm just sad to see how much it costs these days for young people, especially young families starting out. When we came here in 1972, we bought this house in Apache Bluff, where we still are, for $28,000. And my father thought I was crazy. What in the world are you buying a house at that cost for? I said, that's all there is, Dad. So we're gonna stick with it. We were second owners. And today I don't know what it would be worth. Over $500,000, I'm sure. We've added things in the house and so forth, so who knows, but we're so glad to be where we are, and we just worry about what others can afford, especially the young families.
Mm-hmm. It's a big challenge for the future, in the present day. Well, Larry, can you think of anything else you'd like to add to your story?
Well, I just think it's the right time. Every year I think, gosh, is this the best we can be? And I keep wondering I keep hearing about the old days, but I'm learning now that the old days were not as wonderful as we think. They were nice for their time, but today we're living in a good time too. And we just need to recognize that, and we need to work hard to bring understanding, to listen to others, to work together in neighborhoods, to be open to new ideas, to welcome all, to reach out around the world, to help others in need in every way we can. We're a big worldwide community, and Tualatin is a little example of that. So that's why I'm staying. We're not moving.
Yeah, good. That's good to know. Thank you so very much.
Thank you
for participating.